Great, and thank you, Chairman McGovern. Is that good? Okay. All right, the room is electric. Oh, that's right, there is how's this? Okay. We're flexible. Thank you, Chairman McGovern. It is with many, many thanks for your unwavering attention to this issue, and thank you for inviting us to speak on this continuing crisis today. And I would also like to add, before I begin, our deepest condolences on the loss of our friend, your colleague, Congressman Donald Payne. He was a longtime champion of development. He inspired great action and hope. He will be missed. I'm pleased, however, that Administrator Shaw was able to announce, just as Congressman Payne entered the hospital, a new USAID fellowship named in his honor that will encourage members of minority groups who have historically been underrepresented in development careers to join USAID. And I'm told he was greatly pleased to have heard that. Your continued leadership and vigilance on this issue has been enormously important, and really the top line is that in the face of one of the worst droughts in 60 years, we mobilized and we made a difference, and the support of you and members of this commission were key. And since also this is International Women's Day, I wanted to also just take a moment to salute the many courageous women that I met on my many visits over this past year who are really holding their families together and moving their children towards a better life, even in the face of crisis. You know, we've been intensely focused on this current crisis since we got the first early warning systems in August 2010 and were able to pre-position food. The worst drought in 60 years actually triggered 3 interlocking crises. First is in the drought-affected communities throughout the region that, because of ever-increasing cycles of drought, they've depleted their resources. They're no longer able to withstand shock. Secondly is the crisis that turned into famine in Somalia, where drought was coupled with the longstanding conflict and lack of governance. It underscores why at USAID we've got democracy, conflict, and humanitarian assistance assembled into one bureau. And thirdly is the refugee crisis in Somalia, the refugee crisis of Somalis flooded across the border that my colleague Margaret McKelvey will address. So, and each of those crises has different characteristics, even as they coexisted in the Horn. So in Somalia, where 20 years of conflict and lack of government has really taken a heavy toll on families and communities, and compounded by the fact that humanitarian assistance was blocked by al-Shabaab in parts of South and Central Somalia, triggered this massive flood of refugees. And by June of last year, thousands were arriving in Afgoy Corridor and in Mogadishu. 20,000 were arriving each week in the refugee camps. We focused on 3 critical approaches. The first was direct food assistance, where we were able to have access. Second was cash and voucher programs and supports that allowed Somali families to access markets that were already functioning. And third, and very importantly, were public health interventions and vaccination campaigns, because we know that the largest killer of children in famine situations is preventable disease. When the UN declared famine in early July, and it was about the time that we first began the conversation with you all, we already had our disaster assistance response team in the field working with other donors, with the UN, with our NGO partners, to really focus on mounting a fast and coordinated program. We prioritized efforts to reach out to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and to Turkey, and ensure that their efforts were fully brought into a coordinated effort. Very encouragingly, in November, we began to see data that confirmed that this massive international mobilization of assistance was working, and we heard that famine conditions had abated in 3 of the 6 areas in Somalia. Then the good news, on February 3rd, because of this massive mobilization of assistance and because of good rains during the short season, the United Nations declared that famine was no longer present in Somalia. That's an amazing and important story to tell, and it's thanks to support from those of you on this commission, your personal commitment to addressing hunger, and the American people with our NGO and UN partners that we've been able to contribute to that kind of impressive accomplishment. Last year and so far this year, the United States has contributed $210 million in aid to Somalia and saved and touched countless lives in the process. This is an extraordinary accomplishment. And we know the crisis is far from over. World leaders met in London 2 weeks ago to discuss options for stabilizing Somalia. This is ultimately the answer and solution to this crisis. And we convened a side meeting just to discuss humanitarian issues. Everybody there agreed it is still extraordinarily fragile. The situation requires continued vigilance. The rains ahead are uncertain. And we have to underscore that even as famine has abated, the situation is still one of the most severe crises globally. We are continuing to stand by the people of Somalia and to ensure that we have assistance programs that can reach areas even where access is difficult. I want to touch briefly on the much more positive story of Kenya and Ethiopia, because it underscores that where you're able to work in partnership, where you're able to invest in resilience, that you can help people from falling into an even more severe crisis. And for example, we supported Ethiopia's Productive Safety Net program. That effectively kept 7.6 million people from requiring emergency assistance. We provided nutritional supplements throughout the Horn for malnourished children, emphasizing the importance of the right nutrients in that critical first 1,000 days when children's minds and bodies are developing. And we've emphasized assistance that enables people to rebuild their assets and to build resilience even as they receive emergency assistance. That's livestock vaccinations, it's alternative livelihoods. In both Kenya and Ethiopia, I visited programs where we're working with our NGO partners to help women produce and manage markets from their herds and better care for their herds. And these women are in charge, and it was their earnings that were helping their families survive this drought, help their children get the right nutrition, and send their children to school. As a result of what we were able to do over these last 18 months, we've reached 4.6 million people, mainly women and children, with direct food assistance. With the $935 million that we've provided to date, we've had also emergency health care for nearly 1 million people, cash and vouchers for 700,000 people, clean water, proper sanitation and hygiene for more than 3.3 million people, and helped about 400,000 people diversify their livelihoods. These are critical programs that will help build resilience for the inevitable droughts that will occur. At the end of March, we are co-hosting a meeting in Nairobi with our relief and development donor partners to mobilize around African-led planning for risk reduction and the sustainability of resilience and growth in the Horn of Africa. This is an important international call to action. It says we cannot afford to let people slide into crisis every couple of years and respond just with massive humanitarian assistance. We commit to building resilience. We commit to encouraging growth and supporting the African-led plans. Our ultimate goals over the next 5 years as part of the President's Global Hunger and Food Security Initiative, Feed the Future, is to help 500,000 people in Ethiopia permanently escape poverty and hunger and improve nutrition for more than 430,000 children. And in Kenya, we aim to raise incomes and improve nutrition for more than 700,000 people. And just to flag that on the other side of the continent, in the Sahel region where I've just returned, we also have a drought and a rising emergency. And fortunately, the lessons learned in the Horn and the collective commitment of the international donors are enabling us to apply the key lessons and commitments from the Horn to the Sahel: early action in response to early warnings, targeting our emergency programs, building resilience, and connecting to the longer-term development solutions. The United States is changing the way that we do business to place strong emphasis on building resilience and connecting our humanitarian assistance to increased investments in agriculture and nutrition. It is so important to have the continued attention of members like yourself, the continued vigilance, and that will enable us to help ensure that we move out of chronic crisis and on to pathways for development. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your testimony and all of you being here because, quite frankly, you have more persuasive powers than I do. So you're up here in large part because I want to make sure people understand that what has happened, the progress that has been made, and the challenges that are still there, so that as we legislate and decide where some of these monies are going to go, that we understand that this is still a priority. Mr. McKelvey?